All right, so today I've had a lot of people saying stuff about not knowing where to start, how to make plushes, how to sew, all kinds of stuff like that. And basically today I am going to use the Pokemon theme to show just how easy it is to make something and not even have a plan. So I've done these little sketches that I've made. My intention is to make like little goofy versions of Pokemon, and I'm going to turn them into stickers and plushes. So I'm going to do a real simple plush. Perchew. How do you say Pikachu, Vance? Pikachu. Pikachu. So we're going to say Peekchoo. And this is just going to be real simple. So I'm kind of doing a pencil drawing of it so I can see how I want things to look. And then from here, I will do some adjusting so that I can make the drawing for it, so I can make a pattern for it, all that kind of stuff. So to start with, I want the ears to be sewn into the stitch. So I'm going to actually have the stitches here, and the ear is going to go into that. So I'm going to need 2 pieces for the ear. I'm going to try and do the black on the top, so we'll do a simple little black spot on the top. Nothing too major here. And instead of doing stitched eyes, I'm actually going to use safety eyes. And if somebody decides that they like the idea of learning how to do just completely chaotic random plushes, then what we can do later is I will make some stuff using the plush. And in fact, what I may wind up doing is making the plush cheeks. So what will happen is for this, like very, very simple, basic kind of copy of, I'm going to go ahead and make a plush cheeks out of it. Now, normally I would do a pattern. I'd get everything set up. I'd come up with a perfect plan long before I actually made this. But the idea here is that I'm trying to show people that they don't have to actually have a full-on plan. So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change up some of my drawing, start my sketch over just a little bit. I want this to be the front, so I'm going to go ahead and make a flat piece, roughly this potato sack shape. And then I'm going to be using this yellow fur throughout the whole body. I've already got my stitches set up, or my thread set up in my sewing machine, so I'm trying to make this as easy as possible, just to show that you don't have to be perfect at making these kinds of things to start. So the back side, I'm going to do roughly the same shape. I'm going to say I want the same shape, but I'm going to have to put a little curve under here because I want there to be kind of almost a butt. So a little bit of thigh, that kind of thing. So I'm going to put a curve on each side. And what this is going to do is going to allow that material to take that curved shape. Now the good thing is, since this is not something that I'm too worried about making perfect, I can play around with it afterwards. Now the feet, from what I'm looking at here, I'm not going to be able to tuck the feet in while still have them up. So I'm basically going to make 2 additional pieces for the feet. I'll maybe put some stitches here, and I will sew them on manually right here. Again, the whole concept is that I've seen a lot of people talking about they don't know how to make plushes. They don't know how to start. They don't have a sewing machine. So we're going to do this real easy. Yes, I'm going to use a sewing machine, but I'm also going to show you how to do some real simple hand stitches. So it's something you can do basically while watching TV. Of course, you got to pay enough attention not stab yourself. But this is how easy it's going to be. The idea is going to be very, very simple Pikachu. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to make him about this big. So he's going to be hand size, something you can carry around. And in the end, maybe if people like it, what I'll do is I'll trade. We'll trade for some Pikachu products or some Pokemon products, something simple enough. Okay, so if I want him, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some graph paper, and I'm going to do a very basic sketch of what size I want it to be. Super simple. So I know that this is the shape that I want, and I'm trying to keep this on here so you can see what I'm going to be making. Yes, I know it is a Pokemon product. Yes, I'm basically just doing fan art, and yes, it's meant to be goofy looking, but that's the whole point. You don't have to be too super serious with everything you make. So if I want the body to be about this big, I'm going to start off with just a simple drawing of it about that size. And here's why. Whenever I go through this, I'm going to wind up making it just a little bit bigger. So let's go ahead and center this a little bit better. I'm going to want this to be about right here. And if I want him to be this big, make it just a little bit curvy, a little bit of shape. I want it to be fun. I want it to be, what I'm aiming for is this kind of a Pikachu look, but it doesn't need to be perfect. So that's the size that I want. Okay. Now, whenever you cut this out, you have to have an allowance. You're going to have your stitch, no matter how close to the edge you get. So you're going to want about at least 1/4 inch. From my experiences, 1/4 inch for a very small plush is plenty because that gives you a little bit of leeway. And even if it winds up being a little bit small, you can always adjust in the future. And since you're making a drawing of it first, you have this to use. So let's say you wind up making just a very simple nobody kind of creature for your own use, which I suggest. I love the idea of creating things completely for yourself, just ideas that you have. You start off with a little sketch like this and kind of get you going on shape, which is honestly very important. You don't have to have it perfectly figured out to begin with. All right, so my face, I'm going to actually want all of this to be flat. I don't know if that shows up very well. So I'm going to want all of this to be flat. I'm going to put all the shape on his backside. So I'm going to cut this out real quick. Remember, if you don't already know this, use different scissors for your paper than you would for your material. My understanding is that using material scissors will kill the scissors if you use it on paper. So I've got like 3 or 4 pairs of scissors that I use because I also work in different spots and all kinds of different things happen. So the first piece I'm going to cut out is going to be the face and front of his body. Now, for some circumstances, if you want to make a belly or whatever the case may be, you would do what I'm going to do on the back towards the front. If you want his belly to be kind of poochy, kind of sticking out a little bit, give it a little bit of a roundness, you would do what I'm going to show you next on the front end. All right, so now I have cut out my face. I'm going to wind up putting safety eyes here. I'm going to stitch on some cheeks. I'm even going to try and do a little bit of embroidery for the goofy little grin here. It's kind of hard to see, but that's because I'm using another phone as an example. What I did was I drew up digitally. I was just playing around. My intention is to turn these into stickers. So I kind of just started there. You can even see my Charizard is meant to be misshaped a little bit. So I'm going to have all these. I'm going to put the arms in. I'm going to make really tiny little arms that can attach and just hang. So this is kind of the rough layout. Now, I'm going to take this. I'm actually going to need a full piece of paper, I think. And that's just because my intention is to make a few rounded spots. So I'm going to start right here, keeping this on. Let me go ahead and move my sewing machine out of the way. Again, I'm trying to make this quick so that people can see you don't have to have a perfect design, a perfect idea on how you want things to be. So here is the basic shape of my Pikachu. I'm going to do this little design. The bottom part right here is going to stay the same from about here to here. But then I'm going to give it just a little bit of extra space so that I can add, here, actually, I'm going to go ahead and put it to the center. We're going to put the loop to here. So right about here and again to here, and I'll show you what's going on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little cut, like a little pie wedge right here. When you sew that together, it's going to round the back of the body out. So basically, I'm going to be doing a round section right here. In fact, I'm going to broaden it up just a little bit. All right, I'm going to erase my useless lines. All right, so this is going to be the rounded section on his back. What's going to happen is I'm going to do another one like this. This is going to create that essential shape sticking out of the back. This is a nice way to get a little bit of extra plump shape whenever you're making your plushes. Now, the way that I've got this, here's my center line, and I'll do that at the top here too. You can see there's a center line. This will keep it even. This isn't perfect. No, if I were making a pattern that I needed to be perfect, I would literally just draw it in half, draw half of it, fold it, and do it. That's what I'm going to do with this bottom half. So now I want to do a couple things. I want to add another one of these curves at the head so it rounds out his head. So I'm going to start right about here where his head would be. Let's see, right about here. I want a curve to be right there. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little bit more difficult. Because I want to keep it so that it stays the same shape as the face, I may have to do some adjustments for a few parts, but I'm going to... I stopped right here. This part stops right here. That's why I put that mark. So I'm going to want to start again right at the same spot. Now I can see where I've got my top wedge, my head wedge going. So what I'm going to basically try and do is get that really close to the same spot. The center of the head is where that stitch is going to end. I know this sounds like there's a lot going on, and yes, it technically is, but there's a few things that you're going to learn as you kind of make this that you are able to adjust accordingly. All right, so what I've got is this basic sketch. It's going to look a lot like a 3-leaf clover. And what I'm going to do is, I found that graph paper is great. If you are cutting something symmetrical, the graph paper helps so much. All these extra lines give you so much space that you can adjust and learn and figure out your details too. The good news is I don't anticipate this to be perfectly set. So I'm going to start off with a very simple cut. I'm going to get this down to shape. I'm going to fold in half. Get my center line set here. All right. Let me cut this real quick. I overcut it because my intention is to once again fold right here where my wedge is. Now this is not something you have to do, but I have found that you get a much more even wedge if you just fold it and cut it this way. So now you can see these two line up. So when you sew that line, it'll make it look a lot nicer. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it wedged up or folded up so that I can find where these two ends meet. So this line you're going to want to meet at about the same point as this line, since these are where the two edges are going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do just a little cut. They are different shapes. You don't want to mess one up by doing the other, but now you can see that's where it needs to go to. So my little underside to that point, and my top starts right here. Okay, now I've got this wedge already centered. That's great. I don't have to worry about trying to get two of them to come together. And I gave it a nice rounded curve. Now the intention is that's going to be the back. It's going to have most of that curve on the back of it. It's not going to be exact. I'll show you why. There's going to be a lot of shape difference. And what will happen is, see right here, these two line up. You can still see that it's got that shape on the back end, and the same thing will happen on the bottom. So it'll still have this basic shape on the back, but it's going to be very rounded as well. Makes a huge difference on how it's going to turn out. Again, since this is what I'm doing and I'm not making it perfect, I clearly don't want a Pikachu. If I wanted to spend days figuring out a pattern for a Pikachu, I can definitely show how to do that. And it's easy to do once you get, well, it's not easy to do. It's easier to do. You know what you're doing when you get a little bit of practice, and that's what the whole point of this is today. I'm not concerned with it being too perfect, so what I'm going to do, instead of worrying about sewing this and cutting it right now, I'm going to do the ear. What I want is for my ear to actually sew into the stitch. So it's going to go between the face and the back. And the whole point of that is a few less stitches, less connecting stitches. I might even go through some extra steps for the tail to kind of off-center it. But here we're going to take this. This is going to be my main reference point because it is the head itself. And I'm going to go ahead and draw that equal for the ear. Let's see, I've got this shape. Let's go ahead and we'll make it a little bit wider. Now, if you make it a little bit wider, you're a little bit safer off. The good news is that if you use cheaper material, you can actually fail at this several times without it costing much of a problem. If you start off with the good material, like what I'm technically about to do, you oftentimes will find that it's not as perfect as you want it. The good thing is here, I'm not aiming for perfect. I'm aiming for cute and off-center and a little bit odd, just kind of something different. As you can see from my sketch, which I think shows up. I'm not sure if you can see that on the bottom of the screen or not. I'm trying to find a place where anything else that's on there won't get in the way. Okay, so now I've got my ear. I'm going to make sure that it goes a little bit further in, and I don't need to worry about that part of it. Since this is going to go into the stitches, I don't have to worry about this being perfect. I just have to worry about being thick enough where I can get stuffing into it, which is important when you are stuffing your fluff. All right, now get this cut out real quick. One of the things I want to do is I want to make a black tip of the ear. I'm going to cut this a little bit more narrow. And I'm going to show you how to do that part as well. Again, a very simple step. I even have some scrap here, right here, that I can use perfectly to do that. All right, so the good thing is I'm going to just go ahead and start with this point for the material. I've got my other material colors here as well. I think I may have to go get one thing that I forgot. I did my best to set everything up before I got started, but there's a lot of things happening all at one time. There's a roll of paper that's backing paper on the shelf or on next to my sewing stuff. Would you see if you can find that by chance? All right, so here's my fuzz. If you can see really close, the fuzz actually has a direction. I want a top to bottom. I want to be able to pet down his face, so I want the material. That's perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I want the material to go that direction. So I've got my top set. Thank you, Mandy. My wife just helped me get the stuff that I was afraid I was going to have to run off and get. I'm going to go ahead and take my pattern. Now, with this material, I cannot use the soap stuff. There's white chalk, there's soapstone, there's all this other stuff, but I can't get it to stay because it just peels right off. So I'm going to use just a little bit of just use a regular pen. If I use just a little bit, I don't have to worry about when it gets washed, it coming right off. Plus, I'm going to cut right along that edge anyways. This is one of those things that probably falls into categories there's better stuff to use, but because I am self-taught, I don't really have the benefit of knowing all the things I don't know. So we're just going to I'm going to show you how I do it so that you can see for yourself and decide, you know what, I'm not too worried about it. I'm making myself a plush. I'm going to learn how with my own scraps anyways. And it makes it a little bit easier to know that there's a lot of leeway in options. Again, this is going to be just a very small little peekchoo. I'm going to call it, I think we called it peekchoo. Peekchoo, because that's how my son is saying it. He's kind of getting into Pokemon. He's got a few, but at the same time, it's hard to tell what he's actually interested in and what he just likes playing with in the moment. So here's going to be my face. One of the things I'm going to go ahead and do real quick is I'm going to use this backing. Now, you don't have to use this. This is something I use for embroidery and for applique. And what it does is it gives a little bit more strength to the material so that I don't have to worry about it getting caught up and sticking when I am sewing. For me, I'm going to be doing the little mouth. So just essentially what will wind up looking like a little mustache. Using safety pins, I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on. Oops, wrong button. This is my old phone. I don't even have a SIM card in it. I'm just kind of, it's there. I use it for all my girlfriends. That way my wife doesn't catch me. She's not even in the room to hear me say it. She heard. All right, so I'm going to pin this in place. Whenever you are doing your own, you have the option of how perfect you want things to look. You can see that this is pinned in place on the back side, and it's going to make this a little bit more sturdy. My original plan was just to sew completely. I did forget that I was going to try and do this little bit of embroidery. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to black thread. I actually have the yellow thread all set up, ready to go. All right, let's see. Just going to get this done real quick. Sorry about this, guys. I did my best to get everything set up so it's super quick, but all these little things kind of came up. And I guess it's good to know that no matter how much of it you get done, how many times you do this stuff, you might just find that you're going to have to backtrack or fix a few things here and there anyways. So just a little bit of black. Go ahead and set up my sewing machine for it. Almost there. Sorry about this. I really did intend to just get right into the thing and you guys not have to watch. But again, I'm all self-taught. A lot of this stuff is stuff that I do know, but that's part of why I forgot it. I've been working on things for so long that little details just kind of get lost in the mix. All right, so I'm going to do a real quick and simple embroidery. I've got my light set up. I'm going to turn the camera just a little bit so you can see roughly what I'm talking about. There we go. And I'm going to try and keep this guy on so you can see who I'm making. I'm making that. I'm just going to start at one end, make a little loop, and another loop. I am not super concerned with making it perfect. In fact, the more fun it looks, the better, in my opinion. If you are wondering, you do for a embroidery, from what I can tell, you start off with a couple back stitches. Make sure your needle is centered. You pick how wide your zigzag will be, which I always put just about at 3, and how tight you want it. And I put it just above 0. I'm going to use my hand to kind of give this a little bit of extra pressure to pull. There are boots that you can get that you can see through, and boots that you can get that have circles on them so you can do a free embroidery stitch. I actually have a see-through one, but again, I did not realize I was going to be doing this when I planned, so I am not concerned with the idea of having that up right now. And since I'm not doing like an embroidery lesson, I'm kind of just rolling with it. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this. Very simple, very quick. I have found that the faster I get the needle to move, the more likely I am to get it in one pass. But that doesn't always work for me either, especially since this material is so fluffy. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself another pass on the whole thing. My intention is to get that mouth to show up really well on this fuzz. And a reminder, if you are not using fluffy material, there's a lot of this stuff that becomes a lot easier to do. And set up right here. Again, if it's not perfect, totally okay. Just got to get my needle out of the way so I don't stab myself. So again, the idea behind today's live is to show how to basically just work. You start off doing something super simple. This is the easiest version of it where I'm not concerned about it being perfect, compared to a lot of people are worried that they don't have a sewing machine. They don't have really good material. They don't have the practice in making a plush. Making a plush, yes, it can be difficult depending on how much of a perfectionist you want to be. But if you look through TikTok, you're going to find a lot of people that have a lot of fun making cute, imperfect little plush monsters, plush toys, all kinds of little things. And look, right here, yep, see, you can see how imperfect my little embroidery is, but there's a section of it where you can actually see pretty well. And I think that'll make a nice little mouth for him. Something real simple and easy. All right, now the rest of it's going to be all hand stitched afterwards. I'm not going to even do the cheeks with a embroidery or applique, because what I want to do is show you how you can make plush eyes instead of using safety eyes. Now, I'm going to go ahead and switch out my thread real quick back to yellow. Sorry about this taking so long. I know that it's a little bit silly, but I really hope to have it ready. And if anybody's ever going through the process of learning how to do any kind of rethreading, anything with their spool, I'm happy to help you. I know that there are a lot of newer machines that have a whole lot of extra steps or a whole lot of simpler steps, all that kind of stuff. But between the two of us, I'm sure that we could figure out. If you can't find it on YouTube, my experience may be enough to kind of bridge the gap on what you're looking for. As an example, when I first started learning how to do this, I would put my thread through and I'd start and it would skip. It wouldn't hold. And I found that I had to basically pull it really tight into my machine in order to get it to actually set the thread properly. Just a little thing that I learned after doing this for so long, so many times, over and over and over again. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the ear. Again, I want to make sure that what direction my fuzz goes, and it goes down. So in this case, I actually want my ear to get the fuzz going up. I think it's much more fun when you could stroke the ears like this and it still flows with it. Now that does mean it's going literally the opposite because the face will go down, the ear will go up, but that's going to be a preference. You decide what you want to do as far as how you want these things to look. So let me find out what my direction is. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and have this going up. Again, I'm using a pen. And I use the pen because this material really does not hold like the soapstone, and it just flakes right off and bunches right off, and it's really freaking annoying. So if I do this gently, which by the way, I'm going to go ahead and mark my inside. So that's one side, and I will use that as a mark as well, so that when I flip it over, I will be able to do the same thing. So I'll know which side it goes together. If this was perfectly straight and even, I wouldn't have to worry about that. But whenever you are making something that has two sides, I suggest that you mark which side is which. That way you don't have to worry about being confused by it whenever you sew them together, because they're going to go together like this. You're going to have the outsides together, which means they have to be mirrored. Okay, so it's very important that you are able to determine that. I'm going to go ahead and mark this. Even though this is a one-time use pattern, I might wind up making more. Somebody might be like, you know what? I love that. I will totally trade you that for some Pokemon packs. All right, so I'm going to quickly cut these two out. I like to save as much material as I can. If you've ever seen what I work on, I make tiny mice, tiny bunnies, and even this is a tiny little plush. And I save every little bit of scrap that I have, because who knows when I'm going to be able to use it. And I think it's very important when you are learning to be able to just kind of grab an extra piece that you never would have saved otherwise. So it is, in my opinion, great to do. Plus, you might be able to just put them together. I make these things I call reanimants. And I basically take all my scraps of matching colors, or not, depending on how I feel, and just start sewing them together. And in the end, I wind up with a plush that I really like the looks of. So now I have the one ear. These are mirrored, so I can put them together like this. Okay. Now, I told you earlier I'm going to put the black tip on the end. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and cut off my tip. You have two ways that you can do this. They're both relatively simple. One of them gives you more space to work with. Now I'm going to take my black material. Got to find that up and down again. Make sure that I have it going the same way, because it will make a difference. And then I will put that here. And in fact, just to kind of show you as an example, I'm going to go ahead and line this up with the pattern that I cut it out of, and lay it right here so that you can see what I'm doing. Now, when you sew two pieces together, you're still going to have that piece, that little bit that disappears. So technically, what's going to happen is I'm going to lose right about here down. So you want to be prepared for that. So in this circumstance, I've got this piece here. I'm going to go ahead and use my pencil to mark where that line is. And what I'm going to do is on one side, I'm going to be here, and on the other side, I'll be here. My line, well, technically, I guess this is where my yellow ends. So this is where it's going to sew together. So this is where I'm going to want the black to go to. So let's go ahead and make a little bit extra. This is black material is really hard to see on, but when you're actually in person, it's not nearly as bad. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out to show you as an example what I'm referring to. Okay. And if you are using soapstone on something like this, that's great. If you even look right now, you can see it's so fuzzy. I just can't get the material to stay and show up. So I don't even try worrying about that. Now, got that cut out. Oops, this is the piece I use, and it's relevant because that's there. Remember, I've got mirrors, so I've got the different sides together, and I did my best to shape it accordingly. Now you can see what's going to happen is I'm going to sew a straight line to connect the two of these up. Let me do that just real quick. If you were to sew your black and your yellow together before you cut the pieces out, you'd be basically doing this exact same thing and then tracing your pattern over the joint. for me, I chose to do it this way just because. Like I said, maybe a little bit because I didn't plan it as well. But now you have two pieces to make the ear. You had this little bit of excess, but don't worry. When we sewed this one on, we're going to have that same shape on both sides. So now you're going to have a black tip on top of your yellow ear. All right, I'm going to do one more real quick. Again, the whole process is pretty simple. Make sure that I've got it going down. Find my end here. I'm going to go ahead and put my marks accordingly. So this is where my yellow ended. I'm going to go ahead and, you know what, I'll just fold it so I can find that line. There's my line. So now I'm going to want to bring the black up to about here. So, oops, that's my pencil. That's not going to show up at all. Now, again, one of the things that I might suggest when doing this if you were to do a repeat pattern, just go ahead and cut 2 strips. We'll just say cut your yellow and your black and just sew them together. And then you could put your entire pattern right across where you want it to go. And you don't have to worry about these tiny stitches. This becomes a little bit less and less perfect the more you do it. But if you do something like this, when you cut it across, yes, you'll have the unsewn edges, but you're going to sew them together and that's going to reinforce that anyway. So you won't have to worry too much anyways. Okay, so let's see, there's my top. Get this cut off. I'm going to wind up doing this 2 more times, and in fact, what I'm going to do for the next one is what I was just mentioning, where you can sew the 2 pieces together before you cut out your pattern. And I just have to make sure I get all my stuff lined up again. As you can see, with this setup, you have these overshots. And that's because you're basically just creating a little bit excess no matter how you look at it. When you sew 2 pieces together, you're always going to have that little bit that you lose. So the less that you have to worry about it, the better off you'll be. And if you're doing something over and over again, one single pattern, maybe your whole family loves the plush that you make for them, then just find the easiest way to do it. The good news is most of the time, this stuff is easy once you have the shape mastered. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and put these 2 face to face. As you can see, my corners are going to come off. I'm going to stitch right around here. When I do this, I'm going to start at the bottom. This is the side that I'm going to inside it out through and the part where I'm going to stuff it. And also, it's going to be the part that goes into the next stitches whenever I attach the head to the back. Real simple, quick stitch. Just got to make sure all my edges line up. A little bit more. Bring it as close to the top as I can. The downside is there's a very high possibility, what I'm going to wind up doing, because this corner is so small and because there's already that extra stitch that makes it thicker, this is going to get caught in my sewing machine. So I know that. And what would happen is if you were to try to make something like this yourself and having never done it, you probably would have just gotten stuck and tried to force it. Yes, you could maybe get a hold of this and pull it through to make it easier. But if you just stop trying to do something that's not working, remember, sometimes you might find an easier method. So what I'm doing is exactly that. I just stopped. I went down as much as I could on the point. And now I'm sewing up the other side. I used to get so stubborn thinking that I had to do it the first way that I imagined. And eventually I realized that there's just no point in doing that. So now I have my ear sewn together. You can see the black tip on it. I'm going to go ahead and cut off some of that black tip. My experience says that that's going to be enough to make the shape of the ear a little bit weird. And some of this excess will just kind of make it bulky. So there's no reason to keep it all. As you can see, this is very fuzzy material. Trying to get that out of here. So now we should have everything good. I'm going to use a chopstick. If you buy fluff, a lot of times I found that the fluff actually comes with its own chopstick, but if not, literally a chopstick is all you need. All right, now you can see that this is kind of tight. If I were to be remaking this, I would definitely make that end a little bit wider so I didn't have to worry. But for the time being, for what I am making, the size and everything else, That's not too shabby. And I've got my ear complete with a black tip of it. Now, you can stuff your ears. Now, I want mine to be particularly weak. I have learned that you can stuff that, make it nice and thick. You could also lightly stuff it and do a stitch to give it a shape. For example, if I wanted to, I could lightly stuff it and then bring a stitch right across here to give it like an ear shape, a crease in the ear, which is great. It looks really good. And again, in the future, I might wind up doing that. But for now, that's going to be my ear. You see, everything kind of starts coming together as you kind of put it together or start building it. All right, now, to make this a little bit easier on myself, this is my... Here's my down. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and cut right here just to show you what I'm talking about. See, now I've got a straight line. I'm going to go ahead and take my straight line here. Again, I want to make sure that I'm going the same direction with everything. So let's see. That's not going to work. I'm just going to get this out of the way because otherwise it's just going to start bugging me. Down, 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 down. Where's my down? There it is. You might be thinking, how hard is it to find down? It's hard, okay? Sometimes it just doesn't want to work with me. All right, so now, down and down. I want to make sure that they are both going the same down. There we go. But I have to make sure that I connect them properly. So here's what I'm going to do, just to kind of triple check my work. Down, and see, I totally messed that up somehow. Maybe it's because I need to put it on the other side. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to cut this as a straight line. See how many mistakes I'm making just in the process of trying to figure out something that is technically very simple? Because I'm going to need two ears facing downward. So let's go ahead and make that. And down. Man, it's driving me crazy. Okay, so there we go. Down. And why am I having so much trouble with this? It seems so silly. Normally, I don't have this much trouble trying to figure something like this out. Maybe it's because I'm overthinking it. Okay, here. Down, down. Okay. Now, I think that what's happening actually is that because I want this to go up, I want to do it the other direction. And I apologize for trying to figure this out with you, but honestly, there's not a whole lot I can do about the little things. Okay, now, let's see. I got this going down, so this is technically going up. All right, there we go. Finally, got my two edges. Let's go ahead and sew this real quick. Just a simple stitch on the straight lines. Super not concerned with it being perfect. Again, we are just doing a show to say, hey, if you want to make plushes, you don't have to make it perfect. And as you learn, you'll learn how to do more stuff. I just want people to see that you can do a lot of this stuff, even though I'm still using a machine. You don't have to. There's hand stitches that you can use. There's all this different stuff that you can do to make it just as much fun. All right, now get my ear. Now you can see I got this seam right here. I'm not even going to worry about this being in the way. I am literally just going to lay this down right across, trace across both. Again, I've got my inside marked because I'm going to be mirroring this. So I'll flip it and do the same thing over here. If you are making a pattern for yourself, you're going to want to know all these little details. You can always repeat a pattern and then make subtle changes whenever you need a certain shape adjusted. Now I'm just going to cut the two of these out. Trying to save as much material as I can. Just out of habit, I like to be frugal with my material. I don't feel like I want to throw all my money away on little things, but I also don't feel like I want to make something so difficult trying to save money. All right, now I'll have two ears. So I'm going to cut both of these out real quick. Well, sorry, two sides of the same ear. Now, I mentioned earlier that you're going to cut along this stitch. Now, normally this would come unstitched. This would fray on you. This would cause a problem. I am going to be stitching over that when I put them together, so I'm not worried about taking care of that line. If you were going to have an end stitch that was going nowhere and attached to nothing, what you would want to do is back stitch it to make sure that it stays sturdy. And there we go. Now I'm going to sew these together. Just another end stitch, just very simple. I did do a back stitch here when I started. Okay. Again, basically what I'm doing is making an ear, the second ear for my little Pokemon. The Pokemon! That's kind of the whole idea behind it. There's no insult meant by that, but there's a possibility that it's technically insensitive, and if it is, I apologize. That is not my goal to mock anybody. Again, I am not worried about stitching all the way down. If I were using one solid piece, I would stitch up and then right back down. Because I know that this stitch right here is going to cause it to get stuck. I'm just not going to fight it. Instead, I'm just going to stop, flip it over, and do the stitch again on the opposite side. Okay. And once again, just a very simply done task. I'm going to go ahead and cut some of this excess off. I am aware that that's going to get in the way. Again, that's an experience thing. I'm also fully aware that this is going to be super tight and hard to get through. It may not actually want to come through at all. So a little bit of the excess being cut off will help me kind of feed it through. If you are making your own plushes at home, that is definitely something you're going to want to keep in mind so that you don't have to worry about fighting it. Even if you just wind up making it wider at the end instead of going tapered off like I did, I already know that I'm going to be stitching in here. So if I had just brought it out wide, I could have made it a little bit easier on myself. Combination of time, experience, energy, all that stuff kind of makes a big difference in what you can and can't do. Now I'm just going to inside it out. Now that I've got the outsides stitched together, just got to force it through that little hole that I've got. As you can see, it's going to be a bit of a process. Let's see if I can get a good enough grip on anything to make this happen. I may wind up having to cut it open a little bit just to get this in. And in fact, Wi-Fi'd it. It looks like that's just what's going to have to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bit wider the hole. It just means that the ears are going to be a little bit less even than they already were going to be, but now you can see I actually got it through. All right. This fuzz gets absolutely everywhere. So if you wind up making stuff out of this, just keep in mind that you may have to clean your floors all the time. Now you can see these ears are not going to be even. But you saw two different ways that you can put together the two different materials ended to kind of get the ear shape and color. Let me make sure that I got as much of the tip of this out as I could. You now know how to flatten it out. And technically, if you were just doing one color, this was such an easy part. Literally just cut 4 of these face to face together and sew them. What I'm going to be doing with these, I'm going to tuck them in when I sew this together. So that's going to be the ears to my little faux Pokemon. Just a little goofy version of it. All right. Hopefully my son will like this. Making these tiny little things like this seems like a lot of fun, and my intention is to make stickers. But little things happen at little steps. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pull out my pattern, which I seem to have dropped. There it is. Now, I worked this out earlier. I drew up my face as the rough shape that I wanted. I then made it bigger because this is the size it's actually going to be, but I had to give it an allowance for when I stitch. I then made a back to it. There's going to be a curve at the back of the head and a curve at each of the thighs. And if you are interested, I'm going to try and post this video later so you can see, but basically this wedge is now going to line up at the center of the head, and you're going to wind up with a little bit of a back to it, as opposed to being flat on both sides. Again, you can do flat on both sides, but for me, this plan was as quick as it is, shows the intention of giving some a little bit of shape. so that if anybody decides, you know what, I want to make my own plushes, now you've seen a few different techniques and a few different things that can work for you. Again, my fuzz goes down. I want it to go down the back. Here's the top of the head, so I'm going to go ahead and trace this. Additionally, I've mentioned this earlier, I cannot get the actual soapstone or any of the pencils to work on this material. It's so fuzzy. Even on the back, it winds up just peeling right off. So I use a pen, I use a thin line, and this is going to be the line that I cut anyways. So usually that comes completely off, and what little bit is left is not enough to usually stain. I made a star plush out of all yellow. Used this same technique. It was washed several times, and it never wound up staining any of it. It wound up staining the yellow color. All right, so let's go ahead and get this cut out. This isn't like super thrilling, and in fact, most of the time when I go live, I cut everything out before I even start. But since we're doing it all here, the intention is to show you all the little things to kind of lead you in the right direction to make it easier so that people can say, the people that say, I don't have a sewing machine, I don't know how to start, this gives you a good angle to go at. You don't have to worry about any of the things being perfect. Kind of just worry about having fun, getting the basic idea that you want. And if you're making something over and over again, you're going to learn, oh, this angle needs to be a little bit different. This is not sharp enough. I don't like the way that this looks. And it'll make a huge difference as you kind of do more. Again, practice will make perfect. There's a few things that I do that I know will work, and a few things I do that are just kind of rough estimates. When I make a custom plush for people that's brand new, I basically just have to do all these steps several times. I'll do a drawing. I'll see roughly what shapes that I want things to be, where I want them to go. And then I will cut it out of just very simple material. In fact, I've got these really old sheets that I use a lot of times because it's real cheap. I don't have to worry about it. And when I'm done, I can unstitch it and cut things when I need to. All right, so this is going to be the top of the head. This is all going to be making the back of the body. You are more than welcome to pin anything. If you wanted to, if this material is too annoying, you could easily pin along the whole thing. I don't concern myself with it on a lot of points, but I'm going to show you that there are some points that I really just feel that's important. So, the imperfectness of this, let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and sew all the way around. I do my best to make as much of a curve as I can. If you do not make a full curve, you're going to wind up with a weird corner sometimes. And I will show you what I mean by the curve. If you can see, that's where my curve cut ended. If I sew all the way around and bring it to the edge, I don't have to worry about it sticking out awkwardly as a corner. And instead, I now have this nice rounded part. So when I stuff it, it'll look a little bit better. So let's go ahead and do these two. I lined all this up when I did my drawing. And more often than not, when you line it up properly, you've got a nice little edge that'll meet up on both sides. But again, that's probably because of practice more than anything. Looks like I've got it stuck. What's going to happen is I'm going to have to basically use this thread to pull and guide it in. This thick fuzz is not massively thick. You're going to find a lot of faux furs that do a lot of it that are more. But even with this, I have to use something to feed it through. Otherwise, it doesn't always want to come through the needle. Through the feed dogs, through the boot, whatever you want to call it, each part. Again, I'm all self-taught, so a lot of this stuff is just that thing, this thing, terminology. All right, again, a rounded edge. I got one more to do here. I'm going to go ahead and switch my needle over to my left. I usually don't do that unless I want to make sure that things sew through evenly on both sides when they're similar. For example, when I do my snakes, I will do all from the head, which means I have to do the needle on both sides in order to make it work right. All right, pull this. Make sure that everything doesn't get bunched up. Round it to the edge. And let's see if that worked. Now, I am in that practice of double checking my stitches, because sometimes I'll miss an end, sometimes I'll miss halfway through. So if you just kind of press through, you can see if the stitch made it all the way through. And you can see the imperfectness of this. For example, right here is a little bit closer to the edge, but I've got this nice little corner, this odd little corner. I'm just going to cut it off. I'm not concerned with a lot of these things happening perfectly, but from doing something like this, you'll learn all the things that you do need to pay attention to. All right, so here's my bottom. I've got my two thighs, my butt technically, and here's my head. This is where I'm going to use pins. Now, for the most part, the outside shape will be the same. The adjustments for having to put these wedges in is where the difference starts coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this as I go. Got one pinned at the top, center, and I'm basically going to pull this through as I set it across. The ears, since they're just going to go in the top, if I were being more perfected about this, I would put a mark where I want each ear to go. But I kind of want this to be a little bit more haphazard, so I'm just going to stick them in there. I'm going to use another pin to hold it in place. And now, with there being basically 6 layers of fabric there, I don't even try and put it into the ear unless I absolutely have to. So for this, I'm just going to pin next to it really close. And if it slides around, that's okay. If you were trying to make sure that this was in a very specific spot, not only would you want to mark it, but you want to take your push pin and put it into the part that you want to hold in place as well. See, just like that. You can't really see, but I can feel the thickness. Between my thumbs is where the ear's at. And I've got it all the way through so it stays in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and just pin the rest of this body together. Now, as you can see, the face and the butt are really close. Now, if you are making this as a repeatable pattern, you would know that the next time you cut this out, you need to bring that out just a little bit more. Give yourself a little bit more space where you know that it doesn't set perfectly. With me, for this project, I'm going to bring it as close as I can to where it starts to diverge a little bit. I'm going to go to the other side and kind of run it down as well. My intention is basically to get it the rough shape as much as possible that I've already drawn out. And then see what kind of happens with the butt. So I may find that as I kind of bring it around a little bit, I can stretch one and bring in the other so it's not quite as stretched and level it out. That's not something you really want to do if you're repeating something. So you want to make your small adjustments on your pattern. But again, for me, I had the benefit of, whoopsie, that looks cute when it's wonky kind of going for me. All right, now, here's my face. For the most part, that body lines up pretty well. So I wouldn't have had to adjust this pattern very much at all. I may wind up doing an adjustment depending on what people wind up saying. If they're like, oh, I really like that, I kind of want to get a couple of those. Great, I'll adjust the pattern and sell it or fix it or make more, whatever the case may be. And when it's curving, you kind of want to put a little extra pins in there. Now, if you don't have pins, you can take a piece of thread and a needle. Simply as simple as this. And you can literally take that same needle and just run it right across as a running stitch all along your edge, connecting both pieces. Now, this is just a very simple way to get it to hold in place without these pins. And what you'll do is you'll just cut this off. Get that out of the way, and you will literally use that same stitch line that you just made to run through your sewing machine. If you are not using a sewing machine, I'm going to show you a stitch here in a little while that'll help out with that. Oops, it looks like I made a mistake here. I want all my pins to be on the same side. And I want them to be on the same side because I'm going to wind up stabbing myself a lot. I know it. It always happens. And I want to be able to take the pins out with each time I pass them by. If you are using pins and you're wondering, as long as your stitch is not too tight, the needle of your sewing machine will go right over these pins, and you don't have to worry about taking them out before the needle gets there. Sometimes it'll hit them, but you've got a combination of such a small needle and a rounded top, it'll just go right off and you won't have to worry about anything. I have broke some needles doing that, but it's not as big a concern as you might think. Now, the last thing I want to keep in mind, you always want to do this with each thing that you're putting together, is you want to have a spot that you can inside it out. So I'm going to leave a space probably right here. In fact, I'm going to start here, sew around, and end here so that I have this to inside it out. My ears are in place, my needles are in place. Let's go ahead and, oops, make sure there we go. If I haven't already mentioned, when you're using a sewing machine, you do want to backstitch. You don't want to have the thread just going forward because it won't stay stitched very well. And once it starts coming unraveled, it'll come unraveled really quickly. And even if you're making this for yourself, you definitely don't want to fall in love with a plush and then it fall apart on you. And as you can see, I'm taking, or maybe you can't see. I'm going to go ahead and point this up just a little bit. All right, as I am stitching here, I am pulling out just the needle as I go. And what's happened is I got all these pointing out at me, and they're going to stab me. I know they're going to stab me, but I'm trying to avoid it. And you can maybe even see right here is where I had that example stitch, where I showed you that you can use that to hold your pieces in place. All right, get these needles out. Even on the curves, I'm doing my best to pull everything through evenly. You can see I'm twisting the whole piece around. That gets a little bit easier as you work. Oh no, looks like my push pin broke. That's only a little bit annoying, but I definitely have to throw this away. That's not safe. Maybe when my wife passes by, I can ask her to do it for me. I have a 4-year-old that runs around, and I have to make sure that I don't leave needles on the floor, which, you know, is a good practice to get in anyways. Okay, make sure I've done this before. Make sure you don't accidentally cut one of your needles. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and take my chopstick, put it into the part that I left open, and you can see, because of the difference in shape, Mandy, I need you to throw this away for me, please. Very careful, hold your hand flat, there you go. Because of the difference in shape, there's a lot of spots where the underside did not line up, and normally I would just cut and fix and adjust. And when I do the pattern, I will make the backside a little bit different shape too. But because I'm not too worried about that here, I'm just going to go ahead and re-stitch that back and close up those spots that were not supposed to be open. Quick back stitch on each one of these. All right, see, you can see that simple stitch is all it took to fix. And follow along to make sure I don't have any others. I've got one more down here. I already know it's the exact same spot on the other side. Essentially my thigh. My peekchoo is what I'm hoping it'll look like. Oh, it looks like I lost my imagery here. This is what I'm making. Again, what I'm doing is I have these like plush versions of Pokemon that I've drawn up, just meant to be fun. They're clearly not meant to be exact replicas. They're not even meant to be stickers, but my idea is if I draw it like this, I can turn them into stickers, and I can use this design to make a plush. You can even see I put stitches into it so I see roughly what I want to build it for. So I got different shapes. I got to see where I have this. My experience has let me see where I want the shapes to go. And I know that this is a picture of a picture that I took off my Photoshop computer. So it's like 3 degrees of picture. So it's really blurry at this point. But I'm just using that as a reference and something to show what I'm doing. All right. Now, for anybody just joining or who's been here for a little while but didn't catch the beginning, started off with my picture of my Pikachu my design. I then drew it out. And I used a few different reference points and experience to know what shapes that I want. I then cut out a couple pieces accordingly. And I've been showing how to do this very simply because I want people to understand you don't have to have practice. You don't have to have perfect materials to make a plush the way that you want it to look. And look at that. It's not perfect. It's goofy. It's got a little bit of shape. And it's very clearly what I was trying to make. I mean, I'm going to be using safety eyes. I'm going to sew on the cheeks. Let me go ahead and solve this puzzle. But you can see that even just kind of winging it, it's a very simple process that you don't have to worry about being perfect on. All right, now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go get my big eyes. Let's see, I've got a couple options here. I've got a whole bunch of safety eyes, and safety eyes are these. They are shaped basically like a screw, and what there is a washer that you put on the back of it to hold it in place. But you can use buttons and just sew buttons on. You don't have to do anything in particular. So my question to you, if anybody's paying attention, anybody's listening, do you think that I should do tiny eyes, or give me one moment and I will be right back.
Where are you going?
Back to my studio room. Okay, I'm back. All right, so safety eyes come in so many different sizes and shapes and colors. Do you think I should do this size eye, where it's kind of a decent size? See, I'm trying to show you on the camera so that you can see roughly what it would look like here. I think I can use my pliers for exactly this. I've got pliers somewhere. Oh, here they are. Okay, so let's try that again. Grab a hold. Do you think I should do eyes this size? Or gigantic eyes? The gigantic eyes might be too big. I think that the gigantic ones are just a little bit too big. So then let's try. If anybody disagrees, feel free to tell me. So I've got big eyes. I've got let's see. I think I've got some slightly bigger ones. Yep, some slightly bigger ones. This might be a good size. Yeah, I think that might be a good size. So let's go ahead and do this size. I don't see anybody with a general opinion on it, so I think we're just going to roll with what I've got, and I think this will be a fun size. Any bigger was just too big, I think. Let me see if I have an additional size up. And I do not think that I do. I think everything else that I've got, yep, those are the same size. And again, I want to make sure that if anybody disagrees, should it be huge? That is so big. Don't get me wrong, that's pretty close to my sketch here. That's so hard to decide. I think I'm just going to go with this size. I think it's a good size, not too big. And maybe in the future I'll try one with it full size. And in fact, depending on how this works out, no, I can't actually test both eyes. The size of that one makes it too hard to do. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is take my seam ripper. You can use a knife. I used to use just a pocket knife. And for me, the problem was that I did this so often that if I used a pocket knife and stabbed it in, it might just slide all the way across. So if you don't have a seam ripper, just use a knife, maybe another type of needle, something like that. But I'm basically just putting a tiny little hole in. Oops. And I'm dropping my eye. A tiny little hole. I'm going to feed my safety eye in as soon as I find that hole again. There we go. And once you get the eye through, I actually have, they're basically little washers. 1 second, and I will show you my washer. Just a little washer. It's kind of hard to see on camera. Those just go right on the back to hold it in place. Now, I've seen a lot of things where people will melt that down. I don't like to melt it down because I don't want to smell the plastic, so I just kind of nip the end of it. And that's because I don't want there to be a sharp point on the inside. Now, if you're doing this at home, you don't have pliers, you don't have to do that. You can melt it, you can sand it, you can just leave it. You don't have to worry. If you're just taking a button, you just sew the button in. You don't even have to worry about doing any of the holes. You can just kind of run with it that way. All right, so now I've got one eye here. I'm going to go ahead and put the other eye right about here. The simplicity of what I'm doing is meant to show that you don't have to have all the stuff. I started with a sewing machine that my mother gave to my wife as a gift. She wasn't my wife at the time, so technically it was theft, but now it's mine and there's nothing that can be done about it. And put my other washer on. These are going to hold it in place. Again, I'm going to take my pliers and peel this off because I don't want someone to grab this and hold that and accidentally stab themselves on that point. Do be careful if you cut them off, because if you don't be careful, you're going to have it all over the floor. It's going to fly across the room. You're going to hate it. But here we go. My eyes, my mouth winds up being a pretty decent shape. And the last steps that I'm going to do are going to be all separately done. Now, the tail is a little bit of a bummer because I don't have an extra center to sew it into. Otherwise, I would have done the same thing I did with the ears. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and stuff my plush. All right. Now, with fluff, you can actually get this at craft stores. What I use is called polyfill. And I would show you, but the camera is so close to everything that I can't reach. But if you look up poly, P-O-L-Y, F-I-L, you'll find lots of stuff. They have beads, pellets for weighted materials, plushes, and this material is super soft. I think I got my whole ear. Yeah, my whole ear is in there. Sometimes when I sew something in, like when I sew the ear in, it slides out on me, and I have to restitch to make sure that it catches the whole thing. All right, so give it a nice little shape. I will then use my chopstick to kind of move the fluff around. Now you can make it as firm or as soft as you want. I want it a little bit more firm than this. There we go. I think that is a good shape. For having only done this one without making any extra retakes or adjustments to the pattern, you could already tell just that it's really close to what I designed here. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and get some yellow thread. Steal that from my machine. Let me go ahead and clean up a few things here. If I don't wind up cleaning up, I'm going to wind up spilling all my safety eyes everywhere, and I've done that more than a couple times and hated it every single time. All right, so once again, when you are trying to learn how to do something like this, feed the thread through the needle, line up the two ends, and you're basically just going to put a knot in. The easiest way I have found to do this, my mom showed me this, is pinch it, wrap it around your finger, and then roll. And when you roll and you pull the end, you just get a very simple little knot. Now this is what I'm going to use to close my stitch up. I'm going to find the end, feed it right through at the actual machine stitch, and pull. You don't have to pull it too tight. It just has to be enough to hold in place. And my understanding is this is called a ladder stitch. You're going to go directly across from your out. Oops, what did I do here? I think I just got a knot. All right, so there we go. All right, directly across from your out. You're going to go in, and very shallow, you're going to bring it right back out. And again, you repeat this over and over again, and what it does is it literally makes a ladder. So imagine these are the two ends of your stitch. Can you see that? I'm going to move my stuff around a little bit here. Imagine these are the two ends of your fabric. You're going to go into it and then right back out. And when you come out, you go directly across. So what happens is you get this shape as you're stitching. That is pretty close to the same type of stitch you would do if you were hand stitching everything, if you just wanted to close it up. Now, there are stitches that you would use if you're trying to get the base of it to hold together. Where I use the machine to stitch, there is a stitch called a running stitch or a back stitch, I think, sorry. And you essentially just make loops back and forth, and you kind of double everything over. I used to do that a lot with smaller projects, and I still will, depending on how small. Like I make these teeny tiny little mice, So I'll use that stitch to kind of do things like that. But right here, all we're doing is closing up that part that I left open so I can inside it out and fill it. And again, just a very simple ladder stitch is all it takes. Oh no! Apparently, I did not tie something right because my thread just came out on me. Oh, that's what happened earlier. I didn't realize. Sorry about that, folks. Let me go ahead and fix this real quick. That's silly. So what happened is when I did that little rolling tie, I didn't tie the knot quite right. So it came untied, and I've been running a single thread through the whole thing. So now I've got to undo that. That's great, right? Real fantastic, fun to watch stuff. All right, so I'm just going to cut these off since I've gotten close enough to the edge. All right, let's try that again. Yeah. Don't give up, right, Vance? Line my ends up. I will definitely do a better job this time. All right, double check. Yeah. I'll cut the excess off because I don't like it being there. But if you cut too close to the knot, it'll come untied as well. So you don't want to do too much of that. All right, let's try that again. All right, real quick. Since this is not meant to be one of those perfect store-looking plushes, I don't have to worry too much about making this perfect. But there are some things that I like to do to make sure that they look as good as they can. When you line up these stitches, the more directly across you get, the cleaner it'll look. Otherwise, it starts to bunch up. And if you ever buy a plush from the store, you'll notice that there's oftentimes like a zigzag part. Oftentimes right down the back where it's just zigzagged. That's where they put their closing stitches. Since they're not really concerned with anything other than finishing 20 at a time, they found that the fastest way is just to run it and then go. You don't even have to pull this tight each time. You can just kind of wait until the very end. And that's what winds up giving you that zigzag stitch sometimes. Though I'm sure that people who have a lot of practice can run it real quick and then close it. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you roughly what I'm doing and what I'm talking about by just quick running. And then I'll pull it all tight at once. So right here, I've got this opening. And I'm just going to pull it tight. And there we go. It doesn't turn out bad. It's just that when you pay a little bit more attention, sometimes you feel it comes out just a little bit better looking. Now, what I'm doing right now is just pulling the fuzz out. That's habit. I really like to do that because I want to make sure I hide this stitch as well as possible. Now, for the last stitch, I will go backwards just at least one, sometimes twice. You can see if I get this right. Back stitch it. So you're going backwards from the way you started. And then you take your thread, you put your needle halfway through. There we go, halfway through. Loop it around the needle. Pull tight, and now you've got a knot. Feed your needle back in it where that knot comes out. Pull it, and it pulls your string in, out at some random point. And ta-da. I'll tie this off again so I don't lose it. There we go. And now, here's most of our Pikachu. See, pretty simple as far as the details go. I know that a lot of that is not exciting, but the point of this is to show you that you can do a lot without having to do any major or important things. Okay, so I've got just a couple things left to do. I've got my foot, which I'm just going to make a curvy foot. Let's see, I want it to be, let's see, here's his foot. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit comically big. And then once I got that size, I'll make it wide at the top, or the heel, and a little bit more narrow at the bottom. Very simple sketch for it. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger because, as I mentioned before, when you make your drawing, you're going to want to leave a little bit of room for allowance for your stitches. So I'm going to make this just a little bit wider. I don't need to make it too much wider because I want the feet to be kind of small. And I'm not even going to be worried about erasing the part that I don't need. Instead, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. If I were making a pattern that I had to worry about somebody else looking at, of course, I would go through all the extra steps of making it perfect. And I would probably do a digital version of it anyways. So I usually don't worry too much about cleaning up my excess lines, especially on a first run. More often than not, my first run is not going to be perfect anyways. So kind of setting it up with a plan is more important than making it perfect. Now, when I get this all sewn together, I'm actually going to leave another space at the end because I'm going to sew this onto the body in a very different way. Since there's nothing I can stitch it into like I did the ears here, I have to actually sew it onto the body afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, get my yellow material again. I want the feet, so I want the fuzz to go towards the toes. Again, much like the ears, I want it to be so that you can stroke them that way, which I think sounds horrible to say, but I don't think we're in that kind of crowd right now. All right, let's see. How much material do I have? All right, I can use quite a bit there. This is why I try to save as much as I can. You find out that little things like this will actually work out. If you're working from home and you're just using scraps of material, say you've got some excess t-shirts or blankets or towels even that you want to use, the more you can save, the better off you are anyways. But this way, it kind of gives me a little bit of extra space to do a few more things. I make small mouses and bunnies, so this gives me a little bit extra material that I can play around with that, because sometimes, depending on what's going on, that little bit of excess material goes a long way. Now, if you didn't notice, I have to mirror it. One side up, then one side, the other side up. And the reason for that is because you're going to be putting the two ends together. And since it has a shape, you don't want it to be awkwardly, it's not going to come together evenly if you do it both the exact same direction. I'm going to be doing 2 feet, so I would be doing 2 of each direction, but I also had a small amount of material right there that I was working with. So I will get more of my yellow in a minute to do the second foot. What I'll probably wind up doing is finding out how much of this I have left, maybe even doing a third piece here. But I'm not going to know until I get it cut out. And I guess I could have just traced it right away. But I'm kind of also trying to do as much of this as fast and efficient as I can. So when I come back to it, I can do it a little bit faster if I'm not worried about how it looks. All right. Now, as you can see, oh, it looks like I did my fuzz the wrong way. That sucks. No, I'm just going to turn it. You know, it's not like I have to have this as the toe. So my feet's going to be this way. This foot's going to be this way. Next time I'll do it the other direction. So what'll happen is this will put the fuzz going this way. All right, so here's going to be my toes. I think that'll make it a little bit more funny looking since that's my sketch to begin with. All right, so very simple stitch. I'm going to go ahead and pin this. I think that if I were doing this normally, I wouldn't worry too much about it because, again, it's a very similar and simple shape that's not meant to be perfect, but this kind of shows a little bit of the process anyways. Go ahead and get just a few stitches in here, a few push pins. Sorry, I got to make sure I do this on camera. All right, run it across. I'm going to say this again. If you're using a sewing machine, just go ahead and do a back stitch. Anytime you can, just do it. It keeps your thread from coming unstitched on you, unravel. And if you're using push pins, it's easy enough to pull them out as you go. Just make sure you don't get the ball point in your way. Oh, yeah, okay, so I wanted to make sure. You don't have to go fast. There's no rule that says you have to do it at any speed. One thing you do want to be careful about is not pulling your material too fast, because otherwise you'll kind of get longer stitches and it won't be as even of a stitch. Depending on circumstances, that could be really bad, but a lot of times it's not horrible. But it could also stretch your material if you're not careful. When you stretch your material, sometimes it has a lot of different effects. I will do that when I make horns because I want one side to be a little bit shorter than the other so that it curls in on itself. And I make horns for like little demons or goats. And sometimes when I make the spiral horn, I'll just pull one side a little bit tighter so it brings it in a little bit. Now, this is going to be my foot. I'm going to show you my plan here to make sure that it's... Oh, you know what? I'm going to show you one more thing real quick. Again, I like to usually double test. So I'm going to run my chopstick along the edge as I go, to make sure I didn't miss any stitch, because sometimes one will move and the other doesn't. And it's a good thing to get in the habit of doing, no matter how big or small you're working with, because even with a big piece, you could find out that there's going to be some stitches that miss, and it kind of changes the shape of things. All right. I mentioned this earlier. To give my foot a little bit of shape, I am planning on stuffing it. But to give myself toes, I'm going to go ahead and stuff just a little bit in here. Get this into the toe itself. See, if I left the hole a little bit bigger, it would be a little bit easier. So keep that in mind when you're doing the project yourself. Anything you can do to make things easier on yourself is great. Now, the difference is if you have a bigger hole, you're going to have to close a longer stitch. So you decide what is easier on you. And for me, closing the stitch in a small area is better because it shows up less. All right, now, all I did was put a little bit of stuffing in the front. And the reason I did that is because I'm going to use the sewing machine to give myself some toes. I'm going to start just a little bit in, back stitch for sure, sew to the end, back stitch again, and now I just have to cut the string loose, which I will be very careful not to accidentally cut my fabric. So I'm not even cutting. I'm actually just going to go ahead and pull the thread tight and slide the scissors in there so that I can just saw it off. Now, if I'm not careful, which is because I'm trying to do it for camera, it'll actually saw it weirdly. So there we go. Now, you can see I've got a toe. Just going to do one more of those real quick. Back stitch again. Oops, let me go ahead and pull that while I back stitch. And then pull forward. Another couple back stitches. And once again, cut all this off. I do this with my bats to give them the shape of their wings. I do it with ears to give ear shape. There's a lot of useful things that's for. But now I have toes, and I didn't have to sew and stitch all of them individually. It's just this nice little form on it. When I put the stuffing in there, that's what gives it a little bit of bulk. So basically, if I didn't want to put any more stuffing in there, there would be a foot. But I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of stuffing throughout the leg. Plan is I actually want these to stand up a little bit, so I am going to stuff them a little bit more than I would of the ears even. The ears I wanted to be really floppy, but a lot of times when I do standing ears for like bunnies, I fill them pretty well so that when the stitch goes into it, it makes it a very rigid and stand-up bunny ear. All right, so here we go. Use this to spread that around a little bit. This is pretty firm. I think I like that. So that's going to be a preference thing. Remember, if you're doing this at home and you're using whatever material you have, you're going to decide in each individual circumstance. So now I have a foot. Probably a little bit bigger than I would have intended, so I'm going to actually make the second one a little bit smaller. But you can see what I'm going for and where it landed. And of course, there's a lot of things you can do to change all this stuff. And in fact, what I could do for this as an example, since I do think it's a little bit too long, I'm going to pull out a little bit of my fluff on the bottom. Get some of this out of here. And the reason is I'm going to actually shorten the leg out by insiding out just a little bit more, or right-siding in. See, now I can hand stitch this just like I would have closed it earlier, and it'll be a little bit shorter. See? Now I could do this flat, but I kind of want it to stick up a little bit. I think it'll look funny in a goofy way if his foot sticks up. So let's go ahead and get my needle and my yellow thread again. Start right here. I'm going through a lot of material and thread, so I don't want it, I had to push it through using the table. It's not like that's a problem at all, but that's why I did that, just figured in case you were curious. Okay, and again, but this time I'm actually shaping it a little bit as I go. Instead of just doing a straight line, I'm going to try and curve just a little bit. Something that can be done when you are hand stitching that you couldn't do when you were machine stitching. Just have to make sure that the whole thing comes out. And what I'm doing is I'm digging just a little bit deeper into the material. And then I'm going to start going shallow again. Let's see, into my fold. Just a little bit. See how it's curving just a little bit instead of going just a straight line? Now I'm going to tuck this in just a little bit more, and you can see that the curve will finish off just like that. So this would be how you would also fix, let's say you have a plush at home that you love and have loved for years and it now has a hole in it. This would be an option for a way to fix that. You can just do a quick, simple stitch that usually holds really well. You can also attach material between it so it gives it a little bit more to hold on to, depending on how old your toy is. And just I'm going to do another little bit for the back stitch. I could close it right there, which is not a problem. I like to do a little bit of back stitch because I think it helps the thread hold a little bit stronger. So just a couple back stitches, and then once again, wrap the thread around the needle, pull it tight. You now have a knot, and then you feed it in. Now, normally you could feed it in and just pull it out at a random spot, which is what I did when I did the body. But for here, I'm going to do something different. I'm actually going to sew this directly onto the body. And since I have enough thread, I'm going to use this thread to do that. So I'm just going to pull right where I want to start stitching onto the body. So, put it in place, find my thread. I'm going to bring this just a little bit low, and I'm just going to go ahead and bait. It's pretty much the exact same stitch I did to close it, but now I'm joining two pieces together. Okay, now there are lots of things you can do. If you go through and make a pattern, you could put a hole on the body and leave an opening here where you machine stitch it. But there's a lot of things that if you attach arms, if you attach legs and ears, or even the head, depending on what kind of plush you're making, that this kind of stitch is exactly what you need to do. Now, if I keep this shallow, the foot will fall. So I'm going to follow up along the leg just a little bit to make sure that it follows up as well. I don't mind if it hangs down after a few inches, but I want it to be just a little bit higher up on the body. So again, you want to go straight across from your out stitch to your in stitch. If you do not, and you're attaching an arm, you're going to wind up with a little bit of a bulge or a bulk or a fold or a crinkle or a lot of little things that could happen. Now, pull this tight. You can see that it is following upwards, and that's what I wanted. So I'm just going to go ahead and start going across and start going back down. I'm pretty sure I have enough thread here. Now, there's a possibility I'm going to come up short. And if I do, I just tie it off and start with another one. But it's looking like it's going to work for me. Bring it all the way to the corner here. Now, if you get a tighter stitch, you can do more stitches. The less stitches you have, the less strength it has holding in place. It's just something to keep in mind, and it's kind of a preference thing as you go. For me, this is also a little bit of convenience. I have to make sure that everything kind of fits, so I just made it a little bit longer than I probably would otherwise. And just a couple more stitches here. And again, I will close this off the same way I would if I were just closing the opening of a plush. Trying to make sure I get all the way to where I started. Another stitch or two backwards. Loop around my needle, which is very tight here. Oops. No, don't come off. I want to make sure I get around both of my pieces of thread. Otherwise, it'll kind of become a weird knot that will not pull through like you want. Back in where I tied my knot, and then out of the body at a random spot so it hides the thread. So you pull it just a little bit tight, cut it. That slack will go back into the body, and you won't have to worry about it being in your way. And now I have one of my feet. It looks a little different than I had intended. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more forward, but the next one I will change accordingly. The thing is, as I said, there's a lot of this stuff that if I were making this a little bit to be more perfected, there's a lot of little changes I would make the next time I make one of these. Oh, see, I do not have enough material to do it that way. I could still do it. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. So once again, the wide end is going to be at the toes. I could easily just get another piece of material to do this on, but I am trying to use as much of this scrap as I can. The whole point being, you can see exactly how one scrap can go such a long way. So I did one this direction. Let me go ahead and get my material to make sure I'm down so I match. So it looks down. Yep. And okay, here we go. Now, again, I want to mirror this. So this is the way I did it first time. Flip it. Got my material going down again. All right, quick trace. I've only got a few more things that I would be putting together here. If anybody ever asks, how long does it take to sew something? Even running through as quickly as I am right now, it's a little bit longer because I'm on live, because I'm showing a lot of extra steps, doing a little bit extra talking here and there, backtracking, all this other stuff. But you can still see this takes quite a bit of time. There's a lot of things that you learn as you kind of do this that makes things easier. But the truth of the matter is, like any other project that you're working on, this is going to take more than just a few minutes. This exact project, doing this the exact same way, would have taken me like 3 hours just to get this far. Like I would have been messing up. I would have had my thread skip on me. I wouldn't have known how to stitch it up very quickly. So there's a lot that you'll learn as you go. So don't forget that you can't judge your starting point from somebody else's finishing point or current point. But don't get discouraged is the whole point of what I'm trying to say. Now, I don't know how much interest anybody has in this. I don't know if you're having any fun with this. My intention is to start doing this for a lunchtime thing around noon and make different Pokemon. I'll do this on Mondays. But you can see I've got a Venomoth, I've got a Vaporeon, I got a Gengar, just goofy versions of these that I intend to try and make at another time. I think it's something that'll be fun. It's a little project I can do, and I don't have to worry about being too perfect or anything with it. So let's go ahead. Oh, I almost forgot. I did actually make that smaller last time, didn't I? So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to cut both pieces a little bit smaller to make it easier on myself. And I'm going to go ahead and make the foot just a little bit less wide. See, that's just a simple little thing. Don't need to be perfect once again. And this time I'm not even going to pin it. Okay. Back stitch. I'm not sure how loud the machine is compared to my talking, so I'm not trying to like talk over it. If you are able to see, you might be able to tell that one of my layers has stretched beyond what the other layer is. The bottom layer tends to stretch a little bit more, it seems. Which means they will technically be offset, but I'm not worried. This cut out. Eek. Come on. There we go. Now I'll make sure that it's all stitched. I can actually physically see that it's all stitched here and here. So I don't have to worry about testing to make sure that if it needs to be restitched. Normally I would run this all the way through it. It's not something I do every time when I'm working myself. And here's my other foot. Much smaller than the other one. So that'll make it look a little goofy too. Once again, I'm going to put a little bit of fluff into the toe. Stuff that in here pretty quickly. The funny thing is, I actually thought this would be done by now. I really thought this was going to be such a quick project that I could do this super quick and go eat tacos. We had taco night. Yes, it is white taco night. I am fully aware. Just meat and some sauteed veggies. And yes, it's beef, but it's delicious and I love it. And I say white taco night because I've got some friends that may or may not be in here. My name is Salvador. And they give me a hard time because of the things that I do that were so close to what Americans consider things, which honestly there's nothing wrong with that. It's just funny because of Friends. And I make things easy and simple more often than not when it comes to cooking. Even though I love to cook, I love to make things, I love to draw. I just hope that I'm not digging myself a big hole by saying things like that. All right, now let's see. Getting these toes. Now that I've got that little bit of fluff in there, I am sewing directly through the fluff and the multiple layers of material to make toes in my feet. Cut off the thread as close to the material as I can. There we go. And toes. Look at that. See if I can get the light to catch it just right. You can see the toes. Put a little bit more stuffing in here because I want the legs to be filled. Now, I oftentimes will cut off the thread because I don't want it to be in my way. But the truth of the matter is when you're kind of running through these things, you don't need to. That thread's going to be on the inside, and as long as it doesn't stick out, it doesn't even matter that it's there. I have a whole lot of these weird hang-ups that I do, and I know they're weird. I know that I don't need to worry about them, but I worry about them because that's just how I am as an in general. All right. You know, the truth is I have intended to watch the screen to see if there's anybody saying anything. I hope you guys are slightly entertained by this, but if I have not seen a comment or message, I truly apologize. I am here, phone is there, and it's hard to tell if anybody says anything. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and steal some thread from my machine. We're going to do a quick closing stitch on this. My little mock Pokemon is almost done. Just a few more things to go. I still got the tail to do. I'm going to tuck the loose end in so that I don't have to worry about it running away on me. Once again with the ladder stitch, just back and forth, in, out, back, across, in, out, across. With this material, there's a downside that comes with it because that fluff makes it hard to tell where the actual material is sometimes. But if you're using just a cotton material, it makes it a little easier to see. Not something you really have to worry about. Let's see. Okay, got just real quickly stitching this across, and then I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other leg. I'm going to use the excess thread to stitch it to the body. And it's just easier that way. As long as I tie it off, I don't have to worry about something happening and it breaking the thread and unstitching the whole thing. So that's why I'm going to tie this off right here. And let's go ahead and sew this on. Do this really wide. All this thread and material is just all over the place. All right, so if I do this wide, I'll still be able to see the cheeks. So let's go ahead and put it right here. Same kind of stitch, just a simple ladder stitch that goes back and forth. And I just gotta roughly hold it where I want it to go. Now, if you wind up shaping it just slightly wrong, all you have to do is do some of the later stitches at a different angle. So for here, got a simple straight line all across it. I want the foot to go out. So I'm going to hold that in place and do a couple more stitches. Do my best to go directly across from where my out is. Because that, all right, there we go. I think I'm going to have this foot fall just a little bit. So I don't have to sew it as high up on the leg. Or on the body, I mean. I'm not sure what can be seen here. I suddenly realized that the TV's on and it's been playing Blippi this whole time. All right, now, as I said, if you need to adjust some of it, you can just kind of reposition for the next stitch. I think that once I get that on, I think that's a good angle for it. So I'm just going to close this up real easy, real quick. Again, back and forth, out where you came, or in where you came out, or sorry, across where you came out, and then real shallow and close to where you went in so that you don't have a big wide stitch. I'll go backwards just a little bit again. Looks like SpongeBob might have come on. Yep. SpongeBob's on. Not a big fan of SpongeBob. All right. Tie the knot back in. So the idea here is I'm trying to make sure that everybody sees that you don't have to be good at sewing to make your own plushes. You don't have to have a perfect plan. You don't have to have a perfect pattern. You can work from very simple ideas. These drawings right here leading in this direction. I'm making something that's meant to look like Pikachu, meant to be a fun version of it, just a quick sketch version. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you can already tell this is cute. Not everyone's going to love this, but this in itself, there's a lot that can be done from it. You could even learn more, make some adjustments to it to make it more like what you want it to look like. All right, so now I've got a tail to make, which should be real simple. Oops, I keep moving the wrong things out of my way. I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more of this. This is my graph paper, which I use for making my stencils, my patterns. I want it to be about this size. Let's see how many, he's got 1, 2, 3, I got 3. So I'm going to bring this out to here. Quick sketch. I'm going to make this a little bit wide on the end. Bring it down. Now, with this kind of shape, you're going to have these tight corners. You're going to want to make those just a little bit wider. So here, I'm going to go ahead and do a big wide corner. I'm going to do one more. Let me see here. Again, a big wide corner. And then I'm going to go ahead and just make a little loop. That one doesn't need to be perfect, but what's going to happen is, so this is, oops, my battery is going to die on me. That's hilarious. Trying to plug in my phone real quick before my battery dies on me. I don't know what's going to happen here. I've got a whole lot of plugs that I have to kind of readjust. Oh no, wrong plug. Nope. All right. Sorry about this, guys. I'm trying to make sure my phone doesn't die before I finish. There we go. Made it. All right. Just a couple more seconds while I kind of get my plugs figured out. I've got just enough stuff here to be really in the way. There we go. All right. I made it. I'm alive. Okay. Now, if I just cut this like this and I sew these edges, I'm going to have a lot of loss. What I'm going to need to do is put some extra allowance in there, make them a little bit wider all the way across the board. So we'll make this wider. There we go. Now, I'm not doing an actual zigzag in this. In fact, and my intention is to make like a faux zigzag. Again, it's meant to look cute, not exact. And looks like I'm running out of lead too, so I'm going to go ahead and start using my pen. So that means if I get this around here, I think I can see roughly how big that's going to be. That should be good. Then I'll bring it out high enough and I don't have to worry too much. Again, if anybody's wondering, you want to use a different type of scissors, and you don't want to use your fabric scissors for paper. Apparently, that will ruin things. If you notice, I'm actually leaving a little bit extra allowance. My theory is that worst case scenario, I could always sew a little bit more, but if I don't cut it big enough, I can't make it bigger. Get all these pieces done up. And I'm going to make the tail wide enough on the end where hopefully I'll be able to pull all this through. I'm going to have to actually pull this a little bit wider when I draw it out onto the fabric, or when I cut it out of the fabric, because otherwise I really don't think I'm going to be able to get this big knot all the way through this. And I'm kind of not sure how that looks. I think that I need to redraw this. I don't like the way that it landed. So let's try one more time here. I'm going to go with the same size. And let's say, I think part of my problem was that it needs to look a little bit more like a zigzag. So I'm going to put this here, make this nice and wide. All right, so this should make it a little bit better. So I've got a little bit more of a zigzag here. And bring this nice and high. All right, so that should actually make my shape a little bit closer to what I had intended. And I widened the bottom so that when I inside it out, I won't have to really fight as much. I may still have to fight it, but it's not going to be anywhere near the same as what it would have been on that first drawing. And yes, I did give it a little bit more of a actual zigzag instead of the fake zigzag, but I think that we still have a little bit of the comical whimsy of it. And with these, I don't need to make too much of a curve, too much of an indent. All right, let's look and see. What do we think? I think that this will work out really well. I'm going to cut just a little bit more here just so I know. So that'll make it a little bit easier. Put you up in here so you don't fall and get in my way. Roughly what we're aiming for in the end, so that should make it a little bit easier. Get this out of the way. And now, in addition to seeing just how long this stuff can take, you might be seeing just how much material gets used up, even for such a small piece. This guy is only this big, and I've already used so much material for him. All right, once again, you're going to want to mirror this. You're going to have one in each direction because there's going to be two different outsides. My down, I want to go down the tail, up. I want the fuzz to go up this way so that you can stroke it this way. And I already made a mistake with the feet before. So this time, I'm going to make sure that I get it right. Down, 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 down. Excellent. Get out of my way, Pikachu. Let me make your tail. All right, now get this a real quick trace. If you're wondering why I'm not using soapstone or some other type of pencil that people use for this kind of thing, it's because this material just does not hold that. I tried for the longest time to get that to work and it just wouldn't. So I draw it very light, well, as light as I can, and as close to the edge as where I'm going to be cutting so that even if it's washed, it won't show up. I made a star pillow and I put an inside pocket for other pillows. And that star pillow was washed so many times because the dogs were on it or it just got stuff spilled on it. And even though I used a pen to trace it with, it never showed up. So I don't feel like you have to worry too much about something like that happening. And I'm so confident that I do it on all mine. Okay. I'm going to save as much of the scrap as I can by tracing and leaving these big pieces. But this is just a real easy little cutout. Let's go ahead and cut this one so I don't have to hold the whole fabric with me the whole time. If you're doing something at home, sometimes you might want to pay enough attention to what the pattern is. For example, say you're using like your kids' pajamas to make something. You definitely want to make sure where each thing is going to be. For me, it's all one solid color. So I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm getting the specific inches that I want and saving specific things. But it is something you're going to pay attention to if you're making stuff at home, which again is the whole point of me doing this super simple Pokemon Monday kind of situation, is showing people that you don't have to have all the perfect stuff to get what you want. And there are a lot of creators on TikTok that make plushes that are chaotic or random, and they look super cute. And I know that a lot of those people do that 100% on purpose, including making patterns so they can make it again. But the point is that you don't need to know how to do all that stuff to start. You get the basic idea, and I've shown you that you just start off with an idea drawing, and then you start making sketches to see how you want the pieces to come together. And just going directly from that is enough to get you going in a way that says that you're going to make your own plushes how you want them to look anyways. So don't be afraid to mess it up. Don't be afraid to try something new anyways. But I've had a lot of people, and I'm not over exaggerating. I've had a lot of people say they don't know how to sew. They don't know how to make plushes. And the very simple thing is you get a couple ideas put together. You start off with just putting two flat pieces together. You make a square. You can find patterns for a lot of stuff. And it's so much easier than you might be worried about. I'm going to get him out of my way. Now, there is so much material here that I am actually going to pin this in place, because I know that as I go, it'll start to stretch and become a bit of a problem where I want the shape. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a few pins all the way across to hold in different key points. The corners, a couple of the curves, a few things along that line. I don't have to worry about the needle catching on these push pins because they are so small and they're going perpendicular to what the needle will be going, and they are rounded. So the needle, even if it hits it, more often than not, just slides and rolls right off. So you don't have to worry too much about that. I have had my needle catch and break on a few things, but it happens so rarely that it's still just safer to go ahead and run it through this way. And as you can see, I'm just kind of chaotically pushing it in there. There are things that I'll pay attention to. The farthest end of the curve or this corner, that's the kind of thing that I might pay more attention to. But it's not super important. There's not like a super specific kind of pattern that I'm aware of. You might know of one if you are a experienced stitch sewer, whatever, that I don't know. Because again, I'm self-taught and everything I do is just based on what I have figured out on my own. All right, back stitch a little bit. Let's run this through as quick as we can. I saw where the material stretched a little bit between pins. All right, there we go. I always try and stop on the down, that way I can turn without worrying about realigning. Now I almost put a black at the end of this tail. I remember the Mandela effect where people said that Pikachu used to have black on his tail, and I honestly don't know. I have never been so adamant about Pikachu, Pokemon, let alone Pikachu, that I would notice that. But it's kind of like the Monopoly guy. I don't know if that happened or not. I think the Monopoly guy used to have a monocle, but I'm not going to fight anybody on it. Although I will say this. Tinkerbell definitely came out on the Disney Channel intro or the Disney intro on VHS. Even if not all of them, she came out on some. Oops. And Fruit of the Loom definitely had a cornucopia. And nobody's going to convince me of either of those things being inaccurate because I remember them It's not something that somebody told me and I was like, oh, I don't remember that. No, I remember those two things. That's actually why I know what a cornucopia is because that was on there. All right. Very simple. Kind of running to the end of this. Yes, sir. Your tablet? Is it charged?
No.
No.
Wait.
What'd you say?
You Pikachu.
Oh, you saw me making a Pikachu? Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost done, buddy. My wife has kept my son in the other room for as long as possible. I think that she's running out of patience now.
Your tail.
Yeah, I got the tail right now.
So people.
Okay. Oops. Let me get all my stuff out of the way here. Well, you'll have to look for it. I don't know where it's at. I think it's over on the couch, buddy.
No.
Okay, get all this inside it out.
Right here.
Oh, good job, buddy. All right, now I've got the shape, but I think that what's happening is I've got a few things I have to cut. That's not something I knew for sure beforehand, so doing it now is not really a problem. It's a little less aggravating because I know the mistake. So sometimes what happens when you cut these or sew these edges and these corners like this is that the corner itself, right here, will stop the material from right-siding out the correct way. So I'm going to cut right up to my material, right up to my stitch line. And there we go. And I'll do that again over here. What's the matter, buddy? Oh, that's a bummer. There's nothing you can plug it into right now. All right, so now I got that fixed. Let's go ahead and put the tail right side out again. Now remember, the whole point of this is to show just how easy it is to do these things. Yes, it is still time consuming. I'm not going to pretend like that's not the case. But working from just a basic idea, just a starting plan. See, that fixed my little issue with the curve. I'm probably going to go ahead and do an extra couple steps on this, even though I'm mostly done. I'm not going to be able to get the cheeks sewn in. Ooh, I sure hope yeah, it's charging. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and fill just a little bit of material in here. Just a little bit all the way across. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I want the tail to actually stick up. So I'm going to show you how I would do the ears under some circumstances. It's much like the way I did the toes. In fact, it's technically the exact same way I did the toes, just a lot more stitches involved. Oh my goodness. There's just enough space in here where I can't get the fluff where I want it to go. All right, so let's get this all stuffed in here. I'm trying to do this pretty quickly because it's bedtime for everybody, and I still haven't eaten. I really thought this was going to be a very quick process. I thought that I was going to get on, be an hour, hour and a half, and it'd be done. The good news is that it shows the reality of how long this kind of thing takes. So if you ever make plushes for someone and they're ungrateful, you can tell them that took several hours of my day and I have proof. And then you can just send them to me and I'll tell them to shut up. And I have no problems telling strangers to shut up when I need to tell strangers to shut up. Okay, just a few more bits of fuzz. Got to spread this out. My intention is to get this just a little bit into all the little crevices. So I'm spreading out the lumps that I put in there. Trying to make sure I do this on camera so you can roughly see. But you see how it's taking shape a little bit more now? Now, you don't have to stuff everything. You can leave stuff unfilled, and it'll make them nice and floppy depending on their size. You can super stuff it so that it stays really firm and thick. You have a lot of options on it because the truth is that much like with any other creation, you've got the freedom to do what you want to do with it. So just keep in mind that what I'm doing is just what I thought would work out here. And there we go. Now, got just enough fluff throughout the whole thing. I'm going to put a stitch just along the back here, along that zigzag. I'm going to go ahead and do the top as well. Do a couple back stitches. Run it through. Now this is going through both the outside layers of fabric as well as the fluff. What that's going to wind up doing is basically shaping it in accordance to what the fluff does. Stop with the down. Follow my zigzag. And I don't know what this is technically called. I'm sure that there's some name that somebody would give this if they were sewing and had been sewing for their whole lives. And all the way to the bottom. Another back stitch. Use my fabric scissors here. I won't even cut. I'm just going to saw it off like it was a knife. That way I don't accidentally cut into my fabric. And there we go. You can see that it gives it a shape so it'll actually hold up instead of going floppy on me. You could do it along all sides. You can do it kind of however you want with different things. With the ear, I'll do something like this, and it gives it that nice little indent where the ear will go. And you can see that it works on both sides as well. So my sketch that I've been using has it going this way. That's pretty much what I'm going to do. Going ahead and close the stitch up, same way as I've been doing. Let's go ahead and fold in. Now, since this is an actual end that I'm going to be keeping, I do have to tuck in the material. If I don't, it's just going to wind up being a raw edge, and I don't want that to happen anyway. So let's go ahead and sew across. Again, this is that ladder stitch, which is in, out, directly across. Repeat. And it's going to take just a couple minutes. This fuzz is making it a little bit hard to tell where my material actually is, but it's not horrible. And if you're using a cotton material, once again, you'll be able to see a lot of this stuff a little easier. Tuck this in so I'm not too worried about losing it. This will give me my nice little end that I need. Okay. Again, I'm trying to make sure that I get my entire raw edge out of sight. There we go. As you can probably tell, I'm running out of steam just a little bit as well. Not because this is difficult, but because I swear I've been talking for 2 hours straight. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and close this up. Oh no, well, at least I sewed the knot first. My thread broke on me while I was tying the knot, so the good news is the knot's in there. Bad news is my thread broke instead of letting me do what I usually would do. So I'm going to go ahead and set this. Cut off my little bit of excess. Oops, I got it backwards again. Go figure. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and just cut this off. I think I still have enough. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to deal with the aggravation of trying to make just a little bit of thread work. Rethread real quick. I wish I knew. If anybody was talking, I apologize ever so much for not seeing anything that you're saying. My goal was to do this super quick to show that anybody could do anything as quickly as they wanted. Have the little bit of a fun of making a fake Pokemon.
Papa,
Yes, sir?
like it.
You like it? Oh, I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you so much. Oh, you like SpongeBob? You don't like what I'm doing? You like SpongeBob? Well, that's cool. Way to tear me down. All right. I'm just going to tie a simple little knot there. All right. Attach this just a little bit high up on his butt. Again, I'm going to do the ladder stitch just directly across. This is going to be real simple, real quick. I'm probably going to stitch just a little bit up the back so that it doesn't fall straight down. This would be roughly what you would do if you were attaching an arm, if you were attaching a leg, some ears, horns, you know, a lot of things that you might attach to a body. It is a very simple stitch, a very sturdy and reliable stitch. If you are making something that you need to last forever, you can always cut a hole in the body and then leave an opening on what you're going to attach. And you would basically just machine sew that little circle. It is a little bit harder the smaller the circle, but it is still going to be more sturdy than just a simple little stitch like this. All right, getting this kind of curved just a little bit, I think, would be a good idea. So bring that down. I'm just going to shape it a little bit as I go. See, I think that'll be good. Now I just have to make sure I get it high enough up the body as I go so that the tail stays standing. I may wind up having to stitch it all the way up, but I won't know until I kind of get a little bit closer to my goal here. I'm trying to make sure I do this on camera, but I'm also trying to make sure I get it done right, and it's kind of hard to see. So let's try and add a little bit more light. Let's do some adjusting here. Oops, get that out of camera. There we go. Let's see if that makes it a little bit easier to tell what I'm doing. I'm kind of having to lean over my camera in order to see this, so if I cover up something or if I miss something, do feel free to make fun of me and let me know. And I think that that will be nearly high enough. I'm just going to go a few more stitches. Just a little bit higher up and then across. And I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is a quick little tie. Now that it's halfway up and I'm starting to go back down, I'm going to do a back stitch, a couple. And then I'm going to tie this off. And the reason I'm doing this is if something happens and the thread breaks when somebody's playing with it, for example, at least it won't come flying completely off and unstitched all the way through. It might still do that eventually, but it's not going to do it on the first try. So I pull it nice and tight, make my knot, and then just continue sewing like nothing changed. Get this all the way down. Maybe take it to the very edge. Now, normally one of the last things I was going to do is I was going to sew on these bright red cheeks. But because of time, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. What I'm doing right now is essentially the same thing I would do if I were to attach just a piece of red cheek material. I would cut out my circle and run all the way along right at the cheek and attach a second piece of material so that it stays in place, almost like a patch. And I'm sorry that I can't do that right now. It's just that I am completely running out of both time and energy. Sitting under these lights has been kind of funny because I would not have expected to be as warm as I feel. But that's just kind of what happened. All right, now I've got the tail sewn all the way on. You can even see that because of the fluff, it blends in pretty well, which is great. I love the idea that you can't tell that it was exactly stitched on the way that I've done it. And one more stitch. I like to finish the last stitch on the body because that way when I pull it through, it's more likely to pull the knot into something substantial rather than, like in this case, the tail. Pull that through. Snip that off. And here we go. Here's my little Pikachu, my fake Pikachu. Very clearly not him, but at the same time, very clearly a little bit of him. It's meant to be just kind of a funny little version of it. I like the idea of making like a small series of these. I'm going to put a little bit of red on his cheeks, but I will do that later. If I do more, I'll change the angle of the tail. I can do a lot of little things like that. Yes, sir, but you got to give me just a few minutes, okay? What Pokemon is it?
Pikachu.
Pikachu, see? Like I said, it's meant to be just a goofy little version, something that I could show that you don't have to have a perfect plan. Yeah. A small body. Yeah. Pika pika. All right. Hey, can I see that one more time, please? I'm almost done, and then you can have it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get off, but this is what it looks like. This was my starting sketch. I'm going to make some more, depending on what kind of feedback I get. Depends on how many of these I wind up doing, but I want to do them for me, so that'll be fun. But you can see that I am purposefully making little kind of derpy plush versions of them. I will add the arms to him at a later date because if you can't tell, I've got little tiny arms. But again, I've kind of run out of time. And this is what he looks like for now. So he's going to have cheeks and arms, and maybe I'll do that next time. Maybe I'll just do that off camera so that you can see. If anybody's interested in these kinds of things, just let me know. Send me a message, talk to me. Let me know if you want to see more, what Pokemon I should do, if you like this idea, or if I should add more detail. Any number of thoughts that you have. I'd love to do more, and if anyone's interested in these, I will actually make these for shipping plus sealed Pokemon products. So you send me a Pokemon pack for my son and pay shipping, and this will be like a $7 thing. I don't know. All right. Thank you so very much. I hope you guys had a little bit of fun. And here we go. You have a wonderful night.